Welcome to the afternoon constitutional we put together here for you so that you can go into your day and finish it up. You get around maybe happy hour somewhere and people start saying things and you just want to have a little calming effect on the rhetoric. We know how it gets. And so far, we have not had our server crash yet. And unfortunately, the start to Ron DeSantis's presidential campaign has been maligned by folks who've connected him to the Twitter servers. Now, if it were actually the servers that he was using for his campaign, I might say you can have some gravitas for that. But so far, outside of running afoul of YouTube's rules, we haven't had any issues with that. We're going to kick off this afternoon's program talking a little bit about Memorial Day and getting into kind of Memorial Day services and ceremonies going around the Commonwealth because it is perhaps one of the most important times and historically controversial and interestingly to me, with all the things that are controversial around the Civil War, Memorial Day has dodged that. Maybe I should keep my mouth shut and count our blessings that it has heretofore dodged those problems with those who seek to forget anything that had anything to do with the Civil War. But Memorial Day, born out of the Civil War, and also coming in to this now, we're getting it's the only one of these programs that can actually take telephone calls. So we're going to see who this is. I'm going to have to do this real quick here so that we can hear them and find out who it is on the line with us. Hello, who's this? Hello, who's on the phone with us? Don't know where they went to, but we had a phone call in there, and apparently it is we have lost it. But we are trying to get them back in here, and we'll find out. We're expecting the commissioner of the Department of Veterans Services, Dan Gade, to join us from his offices to talk about some of the things going on in Virginia for veterans for Memorial Day, and where we remember those folks who have paid the ultimate sacrifice for our services, and hopefully he'll be with us shortly. That may have been his office because it's the government, and the government calls and says, hey, can you come down the hall? And next thing you know, you're down the hall and you're like, oh gosh, we're supposed to do the constitutional at 3. Also coming up today, huge expose from the Media Research Center regarding targeting, Department of Homeland Security targeting of conservative groups on campuses as well. And the question then remains, what did Joe Biden know and when? What did Secretary Mayorkas know and when as well are both questions that need to be answered in this coming episode. Dan SChneider from the Media Research Center is going to join us to talk about that. And then we're going to finish up with one of the funniest people. My wife and I have been watching this fella in spaces not unlike this for years and years and years. And he was always remarkably funny. We know an awful lot of people in, let's call it the life coaching world. In the world of the life coach, in the world of the guru, in the world of the self-help, self-improvement people. And JP Sears began his comedic career sort of doing that and sending hang on one second here. Let me do that real quick here. I'm one of those people, these gray hairs are not a rinse. So when I look like I'm old, it's because I want to look old. It's not because I dyed my hair white. Had I thought about it when I was 18, it might have been an interesting attempt, but typing was the one class I failed in high school. And it shows now. And it was 1978, 79. So the brilliance of your humble host was that I'm never going to need typing. I'm never even going to sit at a typewriter again. 1, 2, 3. It's like a Twilight Zone episode where, as a high schooler, I told myself I'd never need any typewriters, and now I'm surrounded by them. I feel I was in the Burgess Meredith. All he wanted to do was be left alone and read. And once the nuclear apocalypse happened and he was left alone with all the books, he broke his glasses. That's sort of how it all goes for me there. Let me see if we can't reconnect to this Dan Gade piece here. It was apparently there are too many of these meetup places, and we generally use Zoom, not to take you behind the counter here, but I think they were expecting us to use Google Meetings or something along those lines. So let me try and do this. Tell you what, you do this for a moment, and we'll come right back with Dan Gade in a moment. All right. I think we have the issues figured out here. So shortly we'll visit with the Department of Veterans Services Commissioner, Daniel Gade, and talk a little bit about Memorial Day and the importance of this. And we went back and circled back to where we were connecting it to Civil War. This was founded really by the mothers of fallen Civil War soldiers. And there's debate. There's a town in upstate New York, there's a town in Pennsylvania, there's a town in Virginia, all claiming ownership of the Memorial Day, the first Memorial Day ceremonies, but it was born of the families, the people who lost loved ones during the Civil War, and to grieve and to come together. And it was used quite a bit as a way to heal the wounds left over from the Civil War. And maybe that's why it has survived some of the slings and arrows that the Civil War memorials around Virginia especially have suffered under. And now joining us from his office in Richmond, the Commissioner of the Department of Veterans Services, and he is the great Daniel Gade, a veteran himself, and somebody, had it not been for the Herculean efforts of a bunch of other soldiers in theater, we would be commemorating on Memorial Day as well. Did we lose Dan again?
I'm still here, Joe, but I can't. My video is not working, so I hope that's all right.
It came on for a second, and then it didn't. And then you went away again, so I don't know where it is. But Daniel Gade, Dan, I appreciate it, sir. Oh, I'm just getting an icon with your picture. But talk about the ceremonies going on around the Commonwealth this week and this weekend, commemorating Memorial Day, and why it's important to remember those, especially for those who serve in the public space, in government in any way, shape, or form, to understand that these men and women never came home from the theater to defend the liberties. And that should, I think, make it very special, the liberties that we have, don't you?
Yeah, that's right, Joe. And I mean, I think the real thing here to remember is that the people who died in service to our nation that we celebrate on Memorial Day are people who would have been thrilled to have a barbecue, would have been thrilled to have a cookout, would have been thrilled to hang out with their children and their friends, but they can't. They can't do those things anymore. And so as we go through our Memorial Day, as we think of it as some people think of it as a long weekend, some of us think about it as a long weekend, but also a time to remember with fondness and with sadness the men and women who we lost in service to our nation. And so the Commonwealth is fully committed to celebrating their sacrifices and their service. And the way we're going to do that, we've got a couple of major events going on. So first, the governor will be presenting. He will be present and giving a speech at the Virginia War Memorial on Monday, on Memorial Day, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And so the governor will be there for that ceremony. And then we've got ceremonies at all three of our veteran cemeteries. So we have a veteran cemetery in Amelia, so just south of Richmond. We have one in Dublin, which is in sort of southwest Virginia. And then we have one in Suffolk. And all three of those cemeteries will have Memorial Day celebrations either at 10 or 11 o'clock. And you can easily find those on dvs.virginia.gov to see what time those events are. So we're really excited about those events. Those are what's the main kind of headline events, and then there are obviously tons and tons of local events around the Commonwealth. So I just encourage people to find one of those, take a few minutes to honor the fallen dead, and then go on about your day and enjoy that day as those who have gone before us would want you to.
And I always remember that, this is why those liberties and everything that's written down in the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights especially needs to be held to such great sanctity because of the sacrifices of those, the red stripes in our flag, serving as that reminder. Daniel Gade is on as Commissioner of Veteran Services, and there's an awful lot of men and women who've served us who did manage to come home, who have fallen after the fact. Talk about just a little while Virginia's attempts to do more for veterans as they suffer, the pain that still leads us to a terrifically horrific number of servicemen and women who take their lives after they get home from the service, Dan, and resources that they can find, online through dvs.virginia.gov if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, the scourge of veteran suicide is something that I think everybody is aware of, or certainly everybody should be aware of. The estimates vary. The VA says there's 17 a day. Some other sources say 25. Some other sources say even a higher number. It doesn't matter because every single one of those is an absolute tragedy. So the first thing I would say is to the veterans who are out there who might be suffering, might be listening to you, and this is something they've thought about, or maybe they'll think about it later. The first thing is the 988 number is like 911, but 988 is the number to call. You can get immediate attention if you're a veteran on 988. You can get somebody to help you. It's very easy. So the immediate assistance line is 988. If you can't remember that, do 911 and ask for help. That's fine too. And then for stuff that's more slow developing, stuff that's stressing you out, if you're a veteran, stuff that's stressing your family out, if you're a veteran, we have a new procedure, a new process, a new tool that we use that connects veterans to resources really rapidly. And the way to do that is to go to dvs.virginia.gov, and right there at the top on the upper right-hand side, there's a red button that says Request Help Now. Hit that button, and then whatever kind of help you need will pop up, and you can click on one of the tiles there and sort of select a service. But we are more than happy to serve all of our veterans. And to that end, the General Assembly, the General Assembly has given us $5 million this fiscal year to do suicide prevention work for the Commonwealth. And so we've done capacity building in communities with community-based nonprofits. and for-profits, and we're doing some research efforts too to find out what there is in particular about veteran suicide in Virginia that will allow us to understand the problem better so that we can intervene more rapidly. But really the key resource here is 988 and the website dvs.virginia.gov, and then request help at the top.
And Daniel, I appreciate you taking some time out with us, and I didn't mean to kind of overstate your story, but when I first met you, you told the story of how grievously wounded you were in the service of our nation. If it wasn't for the heroic effort of a bunch of fellow servicemen on an aircraft carrier, if I'm not mistaken, I may be forgetting that part of it. You would be among those we were commemorating on Memorial Day, and talk about those who have come back and the services available for those who need medical attention for wounds that we may never have seen come back from war until our medical technology became so great.
Yeah, that's right. And Joe, it wasn't on an aircraft carrier, but it was Navy people. So you got it.
Oh, okay. That's right.
I think half right.
I heard Navy.
So, yeah, exactly. So I was wounded twice in combat and ended up losing my right leg at the hip back in 2005. But there are a lot of grievously wounded people who are grievously wounded in ways that's not obvious, right? So, we just talked about suicide, and suicide is a disease of despair, and people with post-traumatic stress disorder or people with brain injuries or whatever can often experience despair that just by looking at them, you can't tell that that's something they're going through. So again, the way to get help for those folks is to hit 988. And for veterans who are out there and they think they need help with disability benefits, they need help with education, they want to ensure that when they die, their remains are buried in honored glory at one of our veteran cemeteries. All of the ability to access those resources is at that same link that I just described, the request services link at the top of dvs.virginia.gov. But you can absolutely reach out to us for anything. If you're a veteran and you're out there, if you're a veteran family member and you're out there, reach out to me directly. It's fine. No problem. I'll just get you to the right resources. And I don't mind doing that, because I think that this work that we do on behalf of veterans is incredibly valuable. It's incredibly important to me personally, obviously, as a 25-year veteran, to the governor. The governor is my boss, and he is absolutely committed to veterans in Virginia. And so, on behalf of the Youngkin administration, we are here to offer help to all of Virginia's 700,000 plus veterans.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much for taking some time out. Bless you and all of the fallen comrades you have that you'll be remembering this Memorial Day weekend. Thank you so much for taking some time out with us.
Thank you, Joe. And sorry for my technological delay here. I apologize.
It's usually me, so just blame it on me. That's what most of the viewers and listeners believe in anyway. So thank you, sir.
I was going to blame state computers, so either way is fine. Thanks, Joe.
There you go. Thank you, sir. And joining us, we're going to switch gears here and talk about an amazing expose unearthed by the folks at the Media Research Center who discovered that the Department of Homeland Security has been targeting the folks with their own efforts, with investigations, with targeting that would then put them on the watch lists and keep them under surveillance and keep them under the watchful eye of the FBI. I presume the FBI, perhaps just the Department of Homeland Security. I don't know what the apparatus were, but we were not the ones who unearthed it. It was our friends at the Media Research Center, and Dan SChneider from Newsbusters and the Media Research Center is going to join us here and give us a little detail into what it was they found as they did that. And Dan, I do appreciate you taking some time out and taking us into this story. Tell us what you found that the Department of Homeland Security was getting into. Some of this is even on college campuses. Dan?
Oh, hey.
Yeah, there you are.
We had a miscue. Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, no, so tell us about what you found, and I understand some of it involves conservative groups on college campuses and just conservative groups in general, and it goes all the way up to Secretary Mayorkas. What did you find?
Right. This is the Department of Homeland Security anti-terrorism grant program. Now, this is the grant program that's supposed to be used to protect our country from terrorists coming across the border. And instead, the Department of Homeland Security has funded efforts at Turning Point USA and the Christian Broadcasting Network and Fox News, and these different very mainstream conservative organizations and respected organizations are being targeted with efforts to deplatform them. One of the speakers at this conference specifically said that we want to create dummy accounts on social media platforms, like Rumble and Telegram, to paralyze movements and to manufacture infighting. This goes beyond anything Richard Nixon attempted to do.
Really? I mean, this is to me, it's stunning. And I am one of Charlie Kirk's bosses. We put his radio show on back a couple of years ago, and he does a wonderful job with that. But you talk about deplatforming and creating this infighting. I mean, this sounds like everything that Vladimir Putin was doing with his bots prior to the riots in Charlottesville of 2017. So did we just learn from Vlad the Invader how to set people we disagree with against each other, to divide their numbers to make it easier for us to rule the day? I don't know, Dan. What do you? This is scary.
Well, what might even be worse is maybe Vlad learned from the radical left in America how to do this. But this is what's going on. And it's called the Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention Program. Again, this is supposed to be going after terrorists. Let me point this out. During the Trump administration, terrorists did not try to come across our border. It was too dangerous for them. They'd get caught. So we had less than 3 terrorists apprehended at the border every year during the 4 years of the Trump administration. This year alone, only halfway through the fiscal year, almost 100 terrorists have already been apprehended. We only see those numbers rising.
Wow.
That tells us terrorists feel free to come across the border because this administration is not enforcing the border. Dollars that are supposed to be used to attack terrorists are being used to attack us instead.
Well, and this goes back to the Obama administration. If I remember, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary then had a list, and it was former military members, here as we go into Memorial Day weekend, and conservatives were the most likely place to find domestic terrorism. And it seems like they've just continued. They got quiet about it for a while when it was caught. I think it was Janet Napolitano was the Homeland Security Director at the time. But then you see them going after parents who protest school board meetings. Have the terrorists coming across our border become our friends and our citizens become our enemies, Dan?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll share the list of enemies. The Heritage Foundation.
Oh, my
Fox
gosh.
News, the Republican Party, Jenny Beth Martin's Tea Party Patriots. It goes on. Prager University, Breitbart. These are the organizations that are part of this graph that has been created that lists the evil, terrible Nazis and neo-Nazis. And these are the reputable organizations that are being targeted, with some of this grant money from the Department of Homeland Security.
I'm sitting here agape because I heard you say, and unless, the Republican. Well, I was a little concerned the Afternoon Constitutional and Joe Thomas didn't make the list, but I'll try harder. But I heard the Republican Party on that list.
Literally. The National Republican Committee, the party of the Republicans in America, included on here as part of the, they don't call it the axis of evil, they call it the pyramid of the far right radicalization.
But that's a legitimate political party in a free country, Dan. This isn't Venezuela where we target and send our police capos after our political opponents, is it? Or have we become that third world peephole country President Trump told us about?
Well, this is where it's such a terrible double-edged sword, because on one hand, we're getting sliced directly by attacks against us. But then those dollars that are being used against us are not being used to defend our border. That's why terrorists are coming across the border at record numbers.
Well, you just struck me with another thought, and not to drag my friend Grover Norquist into this, but hold it. We're paying for this too. We're
paying for it.
These are our tax dollars, Dan, being used to target us.
Right. You're exactly right. And guess who pays the most taxes? People on the right pay the most taxes.
So what can be done? I mean, certainly seeing this, there have to be conservative-leaning centrist. Mark Warner tells me all the time how conservative he is, Dan. You know, I'm sorry, JP Sears is coming up. I'm just warming up the comedy here. But there have to be some Democrats who are going to say, okay, it was funny for a while, but this has to stop, Dan. What are you hearing?
You know, I used to work with some Democrats in the House a couple decades ago who would have been outraged by this. I can't name a single Democrat today who would be.
That's very depressing to me because this has become when I forget which South American country, but the president controlled the police department, but the general controlled the army, and they were fighting in the streets. It may have even been Venezuela after an election, and the general didn't win, so he told the army to go after the president, whose police department was defending the. We're going to turn into this pretty quickly, and we have a lot heavier armaments than some of these Central American countries, Dan.
Yeah, well, here's a bit of more bad news. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, no.
We'll be releasing new studies, additional studies showing some other grantees in this program and what they're doing, you know, in crazy ways to influence and infiltrate our public schools, to indoctrinate kids. You know, the chief election officer in another state is involved in this. Why is the chief election officer involved in this?
Oh my gosh. And these are the people we asked to count the votes. And I know you're a very busy man today with this release, Dan. Can people read it online at Newsbusters? Where can they see the what you've released so far?
Newsbusters.org. The graphs are shocking. You need to go to newsbusters.org to see these.
Dan SChneider, thank you so much for taking some time. Have a busy rest of the afternoon. Grab a 5-hour energy drink. It sounds like you're going to be on camera a lot today.
Hey, thanks. I always like being on your show.
Well, thank you. Dan SChneider. It's the Media Research Center, and I appreciate that, report, although, I mean, I appreciate is a funny word when you come right down to it, because I appreciate knowing it. But I have dear friends who are Democrats, and they vote all the time for Democrats. Their wives have held elected office as Democrats. I mean, I don't roll this way. I don't care what political party you have, but it's, to me, this has become such blood sport over the amount of money that gets trafficked, and we watch it in the debt ceiling negotiations. And tomorrow we'll have a visit with Congressman Bob Good. He's going to chat with us and talk about what's going on behind the scenes and how refreshing it is to finally have a Speaker of the House who isn't going to immediately cave in to somebody calling them names on from behind an evening news desk. And I understand, how that can be daunting. Getting called names is not fun at all. But targeting your political opponents with the massed armies of your political police, with the FBI and what we're learning about what they were doing, and now we see Department of Homeland Security. And going back, remember that Janet Napolitano report was leaked in 2009 as the IRS, as our friend Chris Horner discovered through govoversight.org, the IRS was targeting Tea Party groups to keep them from getting their nonprofit status so that they could not actually hold events in their communities until after the election cycle. And say, oh, well, we gave it to them anyway. Eventually, yeah, sure, we gave it to them. Oh, it was all good after a fashion. We all had a nice laugh about it over at Chianti. I'm sorry. I mean, I can't see a darn thing, but I feel like this demands a Walter Cronkite moment. Kids, Google Walter Cronkite if they'll still let you. I mean, I'm speechless to think about a world where the Republican Party can be targeted by the Department of Homeland Security by the president, who's a member of the Democratic Party. And for a second, I want you to gameplay, cosplay, if you will, LARP, all the acronyms the kids tell me. Live action role play out what you would feel like if it was Donald Trump's administration doing this to Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or Barack Obama. What if Donald Trump sent the FBI to find Barack Obama's birth certificate? What would your reaction to that be? I'll bet you'd be pretty, whoa, that's not what the FBI is supposed to be for there, Joe. Truly, the FBI is supposed to be there to find revenuers, those who are moonshining and avoiding the liquor taxes, but that's a whole other reason for the FBI. I have to lighten, after that piece with the Media Research Center, I've got to lighten the load a little bit. And I told you earlier in the show, I've been watching this fella's comedy from years before, when he was just sort of needling the self-help guru world. And then little by little, they started leaning on him. And little by little, he started looking behind the curtain and seeing things like we just heard from Dan SChneider at the Media Research Center. He is the amazing JP Sears. JP, thank you so much for taking some time out to visit with us. I don't mean to embarrass you, but we've been watching you almost ever since you began doing online comedy, kind of sticking it to the self-help guru world. How are you doing, sir?
Well, I love that, and that's not embarrassing at all. It helps validate my narcissism. But no, it was such kind words, and I'm doing good today. How about yourself?
Well, I was doing great until I discovered the Department of Homeland Security has an enemies list, and it is very concerning. Now, a little behind-the-scenes stuff, JP is going to be one of the folks out in Memphis, Tennessee with us. We're broadcasting live. I say this to make it seem like he's coming because we're there, but at the behest of the Scousins and Freedomfest and the Anthem Film Festival. And I look forward to seeing you out in Memphis in person, JP. But you're going around a little bit, working with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the film, which is The Real Anthony Fauci, which is really kind of how you wound up getting in trouble in the first place on YouTube, because you were just talking about stuff and somehow the COVID-19 virus came up, and all of a sudden you ran afoul of the government overlords, didn't you?
I certainly did. I think Mark Twain has a great quote. It's something like, a patriot is someone who always loves their country and loves their government only when they deserve it. But I ran afoul during COVID, and of course that's all in the pursuit of truth and poking out,
Sure,
fun of lies, hypocrisy, and corruption. But honestly, my career certainly changed during COVID, because that was the first time in my lifetime that I really saw freedoms getting eroded, and a little bit about history, so what kind of pattern we're in and where it could go if we allow it. So standing for truth, standing for freedom, and calling out lies, hypocrisy, and corruption, that really became the backbone of my work during COVID, still going on. And that certainly aligned me with, and I've got so much appreciation for people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, they're on the front lines. They're exposing information that I just couldn't dream was true, but they're exposing it because people deserve to know what goes on behind the scenes, so that we can be more empowered, and we as individuals can make more informed choices about who we put our faith in.
Well, and this country was conceived on the idea of us being the powerful ones, and they only having any sort of authority because we give it to them. And JP Sears on with us, and really, comedy has always been, to me, the place where that gets, whether it's Lenny Bruce, and George Carlin, and now yourself in that pantheon, to say, listen, can you look for a second at how crazy and ridiculous this sounds? And I've really appreciated how you've taken that satirical bent that you had at the very beginning and have been able to turn it into a whole new milieu. And was that easy to do, or did you have to stop and say, do I really want to do this?
Oh man, that's a great question. It was two different things simultaneously. It was easy in the sense that I could feel where my heart was at. I knew what my critical thinking was leading me to believe. So that part
Mhm.
was easy, but the challenging part would be the fear, and the fear of like, oh my gosh, like, I mean, especially 3 years ago, if you were speaking against the narrative, they were coming after you.
Mhm.
And, the risk of like, dude, I could lose my audience, I could lose a bunch of them, and who comes after me? So there were certainly some fears initially. Turned out to be pretty easy to get past. But, I'm not perfect, but I do my best to follow my heart. And I know it never leads us wrong. So that's what I tried to do. So it made it where it's like, cool, yeah, I've got fears about what's going to happen, but there's really no choice in the matter. I know where my heart's going.
Well, JP, tell us a little bit. I mean, first they started canceling, took down some of your videos. We've had the same thing happen to this program. I had the temerity to interview Dr. Paul Marik from the Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance, and for talking to a doctor on a YouTube channel, I had an episode. You're a bad boy, and I had 5 minutes in the YouTube corner there. Take us in. When they started to come to talk to you. Were you surprised? Did you like, hold it? I've heard about this. And I don't know how much you consume, media before all this came about, but certainly as this all started to transpire, this was almost proving out things like people like Glenn Beck had been saying for years that this could happen. Were you incredulous that these were actually people who were actually doing this to you? Did you say, "Oh, come on, this is one of my college buddies playing a joke on me"? What was your reaction?
No, I wasn't surprised, but I was kind of like still shocked. Surprised because I know, the big tech, and
Hmm.
they had been censoring certain things, especially on the pharmaceutical fronts
Hmm.
prior to COVID. So I wasn't surprised there, but there's still a real shocking sensation where, at least for me, it's like, okay, now it's not just theoretical. This is actually happening, and I can feel my efforts. I know my intentions are good, and then getting to meet people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and other people
Hmm.
doing amazing work and seeing them censored. And the shock is like, oh my gosh, they are really silencing good people, spreading not misinformation, but spreading information.
Yeah, and kids who are getting in trouble for simply asking why. I always thought there should be an entire year of school where you just encouraged kids to go home and ask why. I mean, I
I love
loved it
that.
when my three kids, they drove me crazy, but that's what we all should still be doing, is saying, hold on a second here. Why are you asking me to do this? And that simple act seems to be the most heretical thing we can do. And JP, I'm concerned because I worry that, okay, we've learned certain things through COVID-19, and I worry about what could come next. What's the next critical health pandemic that could come along, whether it's climate change or guns, and there are reasonable conversations to be had about keeping, I don't know, rivers clean. You grew up, I think, in Ohio, correct? So I mean, keeping rivers clean should be a thing that we all want to do. But I worry, that the government is continuing to learn these authoritarian moves through this.
Yeah. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried. I do have worry, but I also have so much hope and optimism, because one thing we know about evil is it's predictable.
Yeah.
Evil will want to continue controlling, doing its things. So it'd be ridiculous to say, hey, evil's eradicated from the world. We got
Yeah.
nothing to worry about. Of course, evil is going to keep
Hmm.
propagating. But to me, we would really have to be worried if we didn't learn from our mistakes.
Oh,
If we
yeah.
look at so much of the freedom erosion, the disempowerment, people just going along with it that
Hmm.
happened during COVID, it's tough to say, but I think it's accurate to say that was our fault.
Yeah.
And we consented to it. And history will repeat itself unless we learn the lesson.
Right.
That
If we let it, and that's one of the things. I know that My wife says she watched you transition as your videos started to change. I don't know if transition's the right word.
Yeah,
or
I
not. Yeah,
transition there.
it's very popular these days. Do you run into a lot of people as you tour the country? I mean, you're going around and it looks like sold out shows and things like that. And people come up and talk to you. Do you hear from other people saying, I'm awake, not woke anymore, and that kind of thing?
Yeah, and it's very encouraging where, I get to meet people all around the country, anywhere from Portland to Florida. I mean, it's really the full spectrum. And I get filled with renewed hope each time I'm out meeting new people in a new city. Because what gives me more hope, what encourages me, what gives me great reason to believe, yeah, we got a shot at a great future, is hearing so many people talk about how they've waken up and taken their power back.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, not leaving the power in the hands of corrupt establishments and people like is outlined so well in the Real Anthony Fauci movie, and hearing people's stories of their transition where it's like, dude, JP, for the first 2 years of it, I'm ashamed to say, but I bought in, and I was the guy yelling at my family for not wearing a mask, not being compliant, but seeing those people with the courage to wake up, reassess their thinking, and adopt new thinking that's more accurate from their perspective. Those are really courageous people. And it gives me hope because there's so many of them waking up and reclaiming their power. So I do think freedom, just to put it in a word, I do think freedom has a lot of momentum. We still have a lot more work to do.
Oh, yeah.
But it's looking pretty good.
Well, JP, I appreciate it. And as I said, if you're coming or you're on the fence about going to Freedom Fest and you're like, well, I heard that Joe is going and he's going to do his radio show and I don't know. Oh, well, JP Sears is going. Well, now that changes. Now we can get to Memphis pretty easily. Will you be doing, just a part of a speaking panel or anything? Or have they planned out what you're going to be doing at Freedom Fest?
It's a good question. I don't know. I'm on a need to know basis, and apparently I don't need to know yet.
It's improv. Go.
I think the final details are yet to be completely ironed out.
Are you in the Anthony Fauci movie at all? Do you appear in the production of this film?
For about 2 seconds. At the very end, there's a whole line of people just speaking short words of encouragement, and I was very honored that I got to do a little contribution. It's just small and a token, but really for me, my major involvement in the film is being a fan and seeing the film, what is just masterfully exposed, where anybody throughout the pandemic and today who has heard Fauci on TV or any of the other leaders talking about things, and we sit there and say, well, something about that doesn't feel right. That the film is the thing we all have wanted the whole time. And it's engaging, it exposes so much truth. And the purpose of that, I don't think, is to say, hey, Fauci, we got you.
Right.
No. It's for us to know the truth so we can reclaim our power, because there's an old saying, and I think it's incredibly wise: you can't get out of a jail you don't know you're in. We've been in a jail of deception, corruption. The film really helps illuminate that jail we know we've been in, so we can learn and do things better as we move forward by getting out of that jail, reclaiming our power, and not outsourcing our power, our health, our decisions to people who, some of them have proven to just not have our best interest in mind.
Yeah, I think you're understating it there. Last one, was it surprising, having gotten to meet, and I understand a friend of mine is one of his attorneys, so I'm hoping at some point Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will join us here on the program. But having been able to meet him and talk with him. Were you surprised when he announced that he was going to run for the Democratic Party nomination for president, and immediately jumped up to like 24% in the polls? That was stunning, and I don't know if that says more about President Biden or the people saying, "Hold it, Bobby Kennedy's back," and then they hear him and they say, "Hold it." That's a kind of a different message than I'm used to hearing.
Yeah, I was not surprised, but I was certainly pleased. And the reason why I say I'm not surprised is our country obviously needs leadership from someone who is looking to serve the people. I think the old paradigm that we have it's rotten at this point. The old paradigm is, leaders are going to use people to serve them.
Right.
No. A true king or queen is the biggest servant in the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
They are there to serve the people. They're there to serve the community in a greater purpose aside from themselves. And that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s character. As I've gotten to know him a bit, I've just seen his selflessness. Quite frankly, he puts his life on the line, as did his uncle, as did his father, to serve the people, not serve industry, not serve an agenda. So, really why it didn't surprise me, the first time I had a chance to have dinner with Robert Kennedy.
Oh, now I'm really jealous. Okay.
Well,
now you're
send you pictures. And he cooked for me. No, he didn't. But we were just talking about the constitutional freedoms that have been trampled over the past few years. And he said, with where we're at with this tyranny and just all these agendas aligning to take freedoms from people, he said, right now where we're at, this is the hill to die on. And because once freedoms are taken, it's way harder to get them back than to prevent them being taken. It's kind of like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Right.
So just knowing what Kennedy stands for, the type of character he is, the service mind, the service heart that he has, it truly is a blessing. And I would guess his life would be easier and happier by not running for president. But he's running for president because the country needs him.
Well, I know a friend of mine who's also served in elected office once was asked, which is more important, truth or liberty? And he said, well, truth, because if you have truth, liberty will follow. And I think that's where we all have to find ourselves is whether it hurts or not, face it, and we can get it back. It's all still there. They haven't gotten rid of the documents. JP Sears, thank you so much for your time. It's been an honor having you on the program. It will be an honor. My showrunner is my wife, and she'll want a picture with you at Freedomfest in Memphis. I can promise you that right now. But we look forward to seeing you there in July in Memphis as well.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you having me on. And I'll just leave you with, and all the listeners, if you're someone who is a truth seeker and you want to empower the world, empower yourself with more truth, right now, the Real Anthony Fauci movie, you can watch it for free. It's for a limited time. It's at the realanthonyfaucimovie.com. And from my point of view, it's one of the most powerful pieces I've seen in my lifetime. And
of course, you can follow him. It's Instagram, Awaken with JP, correct? Is the Instagram? Is it also Twitter, or are you in that space anymore?
Yep, I'm Awaken with JP all across the board.
Well, thank you so much, sir. It's been an honor. Have a great day. And thank you for lightening up the evening after what I found out from the Media Research Center. God bless you.
And blessings to you, too.
Awaken with JP is that, and I'll steal it at some point and make it Awaken with JT. But I appreciate you taking some time out with us today on the Afternoon Constitutional. Until tomorrow morning at 5. Tell all your friends if they missed some of this, it will get some airing there as well. We will discuss the Media Research Center report certainly. Freedomfest.com is how you get tickets. Again, thanks to our sponsors, American Americans for Prosperity and Spirit of Virginia. We will be broadcasting all this whoop-de-doo from Freedom Fest coming up in July. But until tomorrow, again, remember Memorial Day, 5 a.m. radio, 107.5 FM, 1260 a.m., or download the free Seaville 107.5 smartphone app. Until such time as that, so long, and thanks for all the fish.